Hey, it's Baz, filmmaker dad and the guy behind 20 Minute Gamer. Today I am playing Tomb Raider 3 as part of the remastered Tomb Raider 1 to 3 collection. I've already played Tomb Raider 2, it's one of my favourite games of all time, the original, and I've played Tomb Raider 1 recently for this channel, again for the first time, and I really enjoyed it, so I wanted to see how the third game held up. It's one that I'd never played before, aside from a small demo of an Area 51 level, and I remember enjoying that, although it felt a little bit more modern. There was different weapons, there was lots of alarm systems going off, and it didn't really feel like the Tomb Raider that I knew. So let's see how this one holds up. And before we get into it, I'm just going to say, if you like this sort of video, please do consider giving me a subscribe. It massively helps out the channel. Anyway, to get in with it. Story. You're told the story in a cutscene at the start of the game, but aside from that, there's nothing else. There's nothing in the world to tell you the story, and there's no dialogue outside of this cutscene at the start, which basically shows you a meteor crashing down in a jungle, and then you're whisked to Antarctica, where there are some scientists, and they have found Easter Island type statues buried underneath the snow. So there's a bit of an intrigue, but then after that cutscene, you cut straight to Lara in the middle of a jungle. And there's no context as to why she's there or how she fits in with the story or what she's looking for or anything. I think you just use context that you know who Lara Croft is and you know the previous game. She must be trying to find some artifact or something. But apart from that, there is nothing in here that tells you the story. There's nothing within the world that tells you the story. There's nothing in the sound that tells you the story. In fact, the only thing that gave me a clue as to which part of the world I was in was when the music track kicked in later on in my playthrough, and it had a kind of a Indian, Sri Lankan kind of feel to it. So aside from that, there's not much story going on here at all. And I think, yeah, there's a little bit of intrigue as to why there are Easter Island statues in the middle of the Antarctic. But aside from that, there's definitely nothing here to pull you in and make you want to keep playing, because you don't really know your purpose. What are you doing in the game? Where is she going? What's she trying to find? There's nothing at all, really. So I'm going to have to give this one quite a low one. This is going to be a 4 out of 10. Controls. So the controls here are the same as they were in Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2, the remastered versions. If you've watched my videos of them, you're going to hear the same thing again. But basically, I found that the controls were fine for a modern game. They'd been brought up to date, so they had modern kind of platforming controls, and there's also the option to choose the original tank controls as well. I actually tried both for this playthrough after I only used the modern controls on Tomb Raider 1. And I found that the tank controls were a little bit strange in this one, and I'll get onto this again when I talk about graphics, but the world design slightly goes against the player when it's based on this kind of grid system, and I found that edges of boxes and things were a little bit more hidden than they perhaps should have been, and therefore it was quite tricky to work with tank controls in a way that I've been used to. So I tried the second half of my playthrough with the modern controls, and I found that getting around was okay, but I still had the same kind of problems that I had with the other games, in that I found that she couldn't shoot anything even though the camera was locked onto it if she was facing the wrong direction. You have to physically turn her or do a roll to get her to point in the right direction. And also I found that jumps were very hard to time, so you could run and jump, but it seems like she has to take a few steps before she'll jump in a direction, which did result in me dropping off platforms and things like that when I didn't really want to. I also just want to caveat that I didn't do the tutorials, the mansion, for this one or for any of the previous ones, because I think you should be able to learn the controls as you're playing, and there's no real reason that you have to do a whole other level before you actually start playing the game. I think that's a design flaw. And as much as I enjoy the mansion levels, especially in Tomb Raider 2, I did just see them as a bit of fun as opposed to trying to learn the controls. I think you really should be able to learn the controls as you're playing the game. I think if a game forces you to do a tutorial level like Splinter Cell or Driver, for example, and that tutorial isn't concise and it isn't worked within the story, then it's really going to put off people who are short on time. And I think they really could have, with Tomb Raider 3, incorporated a little bit more of the tutorial within the opening stages for people who are struggling with the controls. So overall, I found the controls to be quite functional, but at the same time, there's nothing fantastic here, and it's a little frustrating if you're not used to this game. I think it's going to take a little bit of getting used to, because within my 20 minutes, I definitely wasn't anywhere near having these controls into my muscle memory. Score, 5 out of 10. Atmosphere. To talk about atmosphere, I need to look back at Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2. With both of those games, I felt like I was a real explorer. I was finding my way through caves or the Great Wall of China, And I was uncovering more and more parts of a puzzle. I felt I was uncovering booby traps, and there were things that I needed to find, and there was an end goal and a fairly clear path. And as I explored more and more, I felt like I was getting closer to a satisfying conclusion. You know, with the Great Wall, you start off outside the wall and you're climbing up to get onto it, and then you're in these tight corridors and there's booby traps and all sorts of stuff going on. And it just really did suck me in. And the same with Tomb Raider 1, in that you start off in a kind of an isolated cave, but as you progress further, there's a lot more signs of architecture and life and things like that, and traps and so on. Where this one was concerned, I didn't really have that similar vibe. I felt like from the start of my playthrough to the end of my playthrough, there was no real progression. It was just as if I was navigating around a kind of a box, if you will. And within that box, there were very video game kind of tropes, such as use this button to open that door, go through that door, push this button. And it just felt a little bit like it was a video game as opposed to these things being placed organically in the world. It felt like there were challenges there that were stalling my progress a little bit, and I didn't feel like I was actually exploring this place. I just found that I was kind of lost in a way. As a result of all this, I didn't really get immersed into this game as much as I should have and could have. I did just feel like I was playing a video game, and there was a little niggle going off in my head thinking, should I find a tutorial? Should I find a walkthrough to just try and work out where the hell I'm supposed to be going or what I'm actually supposed to be doing? And with Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2, that was the opposite. I knew where I was going. I was excited to explore, and I was uncovering things by myself. So I'm not sure whether I'm just looking at number 1 and number 2 with kind of nostalgia tinted glasses, even though I never really played Tomb Raider 1 originally. I just feel like this game is very different to those two for some reason, and I wasn't really immersed at all, despite it looking and sounding pretty good. Score, 4 out of 10. Music and sound. The voice work here in this game is fine. It's very 90s, it's very cheesy, it's very over the top, and it's exactly what I would expect from this game, a game of this era. I found that the music was really well done. It has a nice high production value of it. It's nice, it sounds good, it punctuates the action well. For example, there was a sting that played earlier on when a tiger jumped out at me, and it was quite nice that the sting lasted the duration of the battle, so as soon as the tiger was dead, the music was no more, which I found was a little bit of a peeve I had with the original Tomb Raider game. And there's an exploration track that played a little bit later into my playthrough that did a lot of scene setting actually. It actually contributed massively to the story in that it told me pretty much which part of the world I was in. It gave me a vibe of India or Sri Lanka. And that's really the only thing that I had to go off of to which part of the world I was in. I think that music track did a lot of scene setting as a result and a little bit of storytelling, and therefore I have to give it pretty good marks, although the music shouldn't have to tell you the player where they are. You should be able to find that from other aspects, whether that's cutscenes or gameplay. And finally, I found that the sound effects were fine. There's some nice atmospheric stuff going on. You've got nice ambient sound effects within the jungle and near the river, and animals and gunshots and weapons and Lara all sounded fine. So yeah, no problems there. I think overall this does what it says on the tin. It's a very solid audio package. Score, 7 out of 10. Graphics and style. I think if you're familiar with Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2 as part of this collection, you can probably imagine that this has received the same sort of treatment. Textures have been improved, the models have all been rounded out, and everything just looks a little bit more modern, whilst the original level has been preserved. The only real issue I had with this was the foliage, which was a positive and a negative. The positive side of it is that it looked really good. Everything looked a little bit more detailed. You did actually feel like you're in more of a dense jungle than just a kind of a box. But I found that actually the denseness of the foliage changed the gameplay a little bit, in that objects were hidden, which perhaps weren't originally hidden. And things like the end of platforms that you were trying to jump off were a little bit more hidden as well. And I just felt like it was perhaps a little bit too dense, and the work gone into it, whilst really building the world out and making it look a little bit more realistic and perhaps a little bit more modern, actually did impact the way that I was navigating the map and the way that I was interacting with items and things like that. And I'm not sure that that's a good thing, really. It's not something that I encountered playing the other games, but those were very much caves and things. This is the first game that I played that was full kind of jungle and things like that. And I also noticed that, like the other games, this has a nice volumetric kind of lighting going on where you had god rays and things like that coming through trees, which looked great. But I found that the mist and steam that was present in the other games, in this game it felt less volumetric and more just like kind of flat textures floating in the environment. And actually, as I was looking at them, I thought, you know what, this map would look better if those weren't there. You know, if you can't use the steam particles and things that they did in the previous games, then perhaps just do without, because they just looked a little bit strange. It was like flat layers just floating in space. And so that did pull me out of it a little bit more. So overall, whilst this does look really good and it's a nice looking game, I think they'd perhaps gone a little bit too far with it, and it has impacted the gameplay a little bit for me. All that considered, I'm going to give this 7 out of 10. Gameplay. I'm really sorry to say that I didn't really get into this one at all, and although it looked and sounded as I expected it to coming off the back of Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2, it just didn't hook me in. I felt less like an explorer and more like I was just lost. I felt like the map was just a bit all over the place, and I felt like there were obstacles just put in my way just to slow me down, as opposed to actually having that kind of feeling of exploration. And just to compare it, in Tomb Raider 2 you start off in a cave outside the Great Wall of China, and you can see it there in the distance, so you know where your target is. And then you climb up and you're in the Great Wall, and there's a door that's locked, so you go off to the side and look for a switch or a key, which you find that then unlocks the next bit of the wall, and then there's booby traps, and you feel like you're getting further and further into this kind of tomb or into the belly of the beast, and you feel like you're making some progress. To contrast that with Tomb Raider 3, I felt like I was just in a box, and the box had lots of traps and things placed around, but nothing really following a kind of a linear path, and nothing that felt like I was actually making progress. In Tomb Raider 1 and Tomb Raider 2, by the end of my 20-minute playthrough, which again really is just the introduction of each game, I felt like I'd made some genuine progress, and I was close to a target, or I was close to uncovering the next big discovery around the corner. Where here I felt like I was just in a slightly different box, a slightly different, nicely textured box, but I hadn't really made any progress. When you add on to the fact that I didn't know what I was in the jungle to find anywhere, it just makes it even less fun. I don't know what's around the corner, and I don't know what I'm looking for, and therefore when there's nothing around the corner, have I really made that much progress? I just felt like I was just playing a video game instead of actually exploring like I was with the original two games. My playthrough basically consisted in me dying several times while trying to time jumps over spikes as I slid down a slope at the start of the game. I did die 3 or 4 times. You know, I'll hold my hands up and say perhaps I'm not the best player of this game, but it seemed like it was really trying to just kill me off at the start for some reason. There was also an Indiana Jones style boulder that rolled down the hill and killed me, and I don't know what I did to activate it. It just seemed to appear, and I didn't actually see it until it was on top of me. Unlike the previous games where the camera would switch to show you the threat, this one just seemed to just come out of nowhere and kill me, almost like trial and error. Like, yeah, you're going to die, and then you're going to go back and play it again. And that's not really like how I play Tomb Raider games, to be honest. Especially when the save system's quite brutal. Every time I died, I went back to the start of the level. There were lots of enemies hidden around, and they were alright. There's about the right amount of combat in this, I would think. They weren't overwhelming, but there was enough there to keep you on your toes. I did find that in 20 minutes I must have opened 5 or 6 doors and gates and things like that, and that's pretty repetitive gameplay considering I'm playing this for such a short amount of time, and I think it really does set a different tone to the game. But I do think overall this really didn't meet my expectations. It didn't feel like I was playing a main entry Tomb Raider game. I felt more like I was playing a kind of a spin-off or something, or a fan mod or something like that. It just felt big and empty and confusing, and I don't think I made any actual progress, and I certainly don't want to keep on playing for the sake of the gameplay, because there's nothing new here compared to the previous games. It feels really bad, but I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. The standout moment in my 20 minutes. You can probably tell I didn't really enjoy this one that much, but the highlight for me has to be when the music track kicked in as I was exploring. I did for a moment feel like I was an explorer, and it also set the scene quite well. It told me which part of the world I was in, which up until that point I had no idea. And so I think just based on the composition and the production values and everything just kind of gelled at that moment, I did feel like, oh, okay, there's a glimmer of hope here. This could be classic Tomb Raider. Final verdict, is this worth 20 minutes? Look, I know there's going to be some Tomb Raider fans out there that probably love this game and they probably hold it really highly in their memory, and they might really like this in the remaster collection, and perhaps I've been playing it all wrong and I'm just not very good at playing Tomb Raider games, and you know, the right path was there all along and it was so obvious and I'm so daft I couldn't see it. However, I did not get that with Tomb Raider 1 and I did not get that with Tomb Raider 2. And the fact that this one really did just leave me confused and feeling like I hadn't made any progress in 20 minutes, which is a good chunk of time, it's just disappointing. I don't think this game really needs to be played if you are not familiar with it, unless you're playing it for nostalgia and want to see how it's been brought up to date. I don't think this is a good point to jump into Tomb Raider, and I don't think that if I was doing a playthrough of all the games, this is one that I might be tempted to just skip by, because if you have to play more than 20 minutes before the game starts to get good, it really could have made it more exciting that first 20 minutes. And I think if it's holding off its best tricks for later in the game, that's a shame, because these games are always really good from the get-go. It has actually left me wanting more, but not more of this. It's left me wanting more classic Tomb Raider, and I'm hoping that when I get round to playing The Last Revelation, which I do have fond memories of, that it's a little bit more aligned to what I expect and what I want from a Tomb Raider game. As a result, this is a disappointing conclusion to the trilogy, and I would rate the opening of this game really low compared to the other two. I'm going to give this one 4 out of 10. What do you think? If you're a Tomb Raider fan, no doubt you're typing away in the comments and you're furious with me. Or perhaps I got it right and this is a strange one to play through now. Is it the remaster that's done that, or was it originally always a little bit off? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. I do read and reply to as many as I can. And as I said before, if you do like this sort of content, talking about the openings of games and how impactful they are and how much they make you want to play the rest of the game, if you're short on time, then please do consider giving me a subscribe. I try to do 1 or 2 videos each week. And with that said, I'll see you on the next one.